Welcome, everyone. We're just going to wait a few more minutes to start, just so that everyone who wants to join can join, and then we can kick off. Do let us know where you're joining us from on the chat. Just make sure you're sending your messages to everyone so that everyone on this call can see where you're joining us from. I'm joining you from London. Jen and Silvio, where are you joining us from?
Barcelona.
Oh, welcome.
Barcelona.
Sorry, Jen, I spoke over you. All right, I think we should start. So hi, everyone, and welcome to this Future of E-commerce webinar. We're joined by the best in the business today. So we have Genevieve and Silvio from our industry solutions team here at MongoDB. And my name is Soha, and I will be your co-host today. So just a few housekeeping notes before we get started. This webinar will be recorded and will be shared with you tomorrow via email. If you have any questions, please use the Q&A function at the bottom of your Zoom interface. We will answer all of your questions at the end of this presentation. But if we cannot get to your question in today's session, someone from our team will follow up with you within the week to answer it. And as I mentioned before, please do let us know. I see everyone is sending messages on the chat. Please do let us know where you're joining us from. I'm joining you from London. Jen and Silvio, where are you joining us from?
So we're both based out of the Barcelona office.
Barcelona, nice. I'm sure it's really sunny where you are now. It's very rainy in London.
This is why I moved.
Great. And then lastly, your feedback is very important to us. We'll be launching a poll at the end of this webinar. If you can just take a few minutes to answer us, and then so that we can continue giving you relevant content. And with that said, I'll just pass it over to you, Jen. Thanks.
Wonderful. Thanks for the introduction, Soha. And thanks everyone for joining today. I know it's a very busy schedule, especially for retailers coming up to Black Friday, to Christmas. You've got plenty on your agenda, I'm sure. So we really appreciate you taking the time today to listen to us talk about the future of e-commerce, what the modernization journey with MongoDB looks like. So let's go through a brief agenda of what we're going to cover today. So I want to take you guys to start off what are the modernization challenges that retailers are facing. So this isn't a new industry, and it's really important to recognize that we have some retailers who started with just a single store 50, 60, 70 years ago and are now running massive global chains. So, if we imagine one of our biggest customers in the UK, Boots, that was a small chemist in Nottingham, which started in 1951. Now they have 2,500 stores across the UK, the largest warehouse in the UK. They have an e-commerce site, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So a lot of the retailers, these legacy retailers, were really early adopters of IT. Especially in the 2000s, one of the first kind of wave of companies to go online and create digital services. And that leaves a lot of technical debt, a lot of legacy systems in their infrastructure. So how can we modernize that to meet modern customers' expectations? The flip side, of course, is retailers who just opened businesses a few years ago. How do you move to the cloud? Modernization in this industry is moving faster and faster than ever. We saw that kind of in record speed during the pandemic. How can you keep modernizing so you can keep up in such a competitive industry? And then we'll talk about what we're seeing today. What is the innovation we're seeing today in the customer journey? What's the technology that's enabling improvements along each touch point, whether it's someone online, whether it's someone in store, or what's becoming more and more common, an omnichannel journey, which is one of the most difficult challenges to reconcile data across. So this will get us on the same page about where people are today and what the end goal is. Then we'll look at where MongoDB comes in. So what features of our database, our developer data platform, Atlas, are enabling retailers to modernize? So we'll go through some of those fab features, and then Silvio is going to take over and do an Atlas demo to show you how easy it is to spin up a cluster. We're going to leave some time at the end for Q&A. So as So has said, please do leave some questions in the chat as we go along. We'll try to get to them all. If we don't get to them all, we will make sure to answer you within the week. And if we've no questions at all, we've got to let Silvio ask one. So hopefully he'll ask me a nice one. Okay. What is retail? So before we jump into kind of technology and challenges and everything else, let's get on the same page as, how are we defining retail? Retail essentially is just the process of selling goods, services through multiple channels for personal or familial use. So it's matching the retail or individual demands and desires of the consumer to the suppliers and the manufacturers and the service providers who are creating the product or service that you're then retailing. So on the left-hand side here, we see the components that go into this: manufacturing, supply chain, store operations, employees. These are large, complex networks of systems, infrastructure, people that retailers need to keep working with. But what's emerging now over the last 10, 15 years is the move to online. It's new opportunities, but also new challenges. So let's look at things like social selling, for example, putting ads on Facebook, and other sites like Instagram. Can you let people look at your products? Can you let them review them? Can you make sure that your ads are for products that are still in stock? Can you make sure that if your audience suddenly starts trending, that your supply chain will actually meet that demand, that your e-commerce site isn't going to go down because some influencer is suddenly wearing a dress that you've got for sale? And another big one we're seeing kind of trends emerging on is location-based marketing. This is really, are you marketing to a segment that can actually buy the products that you have in the shelf in that area? And also, say when I go into a store, let's say I go to Selfridges in London shopping, and can I get a notification on my loyalty application to say, hey, Genevieve, you were looking at these shoes last week. Did you know the shoe section is on level 3? Here's a 5% discount. Or even if there's no discount, your size is in stock. Why don't you go have a look? These are the kind of things that we're seeing kind of, how retailers are leveraging the internet and multi-channel experiences. So, you used to walk into a store, buy something, leave, carry it home. Now you're still looking at your phone before you get there, while you're there, when you get home. And you're expecting there to be a really consistent experience, consistent data sets in real time across that whole data, across that whole journey. So, what we're seeing now is kind of like a real blending of both, that brick and mortar stores are going into e-commerce, e-commerce stores are moving, in the case of something like Amazon Fresh, moving into brick and mortar. So almost every experience now is expected to be an omni-channel experience. People are really expecting that same set of products, the same kind of customer personalization in stores they are online. And that's something that traditionally is very difficult to deliver. So let's get into what I call kind of the 4 Ds of retail innovation. So kind of, if you have a retailer that's been in the business for several years, one of these kind of more established brands, if you think of Boots as a great example, or even the Tesco's of the world, who've been in business for many, many years. When they started, everything was manual processes, everything was paper processes. When their staff arrived to the store, you have a manual paper card to click in. This isn't that long ago. Even I used to do that when I was a teenager working in Dunnes Stores in Ireland. You know, those systems don't exist anymore. They're moving into digital processes. So a really good example is, you know, when inventory arrives at the store, you used to have to sign for it. You used to update that manually into your system. Digitalization is the next step, where we're kind of using technology to really streamline a lot of those processes, establishing information systems to streamline kind of the ways that your customers are engaging and the way that you're working within the workforce. So in that same case, the truck comes in from your supplier. Instead of manually signing for a delivery, you scan a code with a handheld device that automatically updates the inventory. Or perhaps the inventory of an item is particularly low. Perhaps the number of umbrellas I have on the shelf is reaching 10 or lower. Does your system actually recognize that fact? Does it actually alert you? And when you get into the digital transformation, can it automatically reorder something? So when we're looking at digital transformation, what we're talking about really is unlocking value from the data that you have, not simply having, you know, an up-to-date, reliable system of data, but actually leveraging that to provide new services. So that could be automating simple things like stock reordering. That could be creating new processes and services to kind of to offer to your customers. So a really good example of this is in the kind of the large goods space. So something like AO.com, who sells washing machines. And you know, did you know that in large appliances, there's a really low profit margin? So how businesses like that are really leveraging the customers that are on their site is that the minute you add that washing machine to your basket, it's saying, here's a warranty. Do you want some insurance? Do you want some help installing that item? Not only is the customer happy because I don't know how to install a washing machine, but you're also kind of upping your profit margin. So you're using the data, you're using the things that your customer is doing to create new services, new goods, new things you can offer the customer online. The final D in the chain is then digital DNA. So this is really when we're looking at kind of a cross-functional workforce. So understanding kind of not only can you use your data within the, you know, within the remit of it is, so stock is low, reorders in stock, but you're actually using it across the business. So say the number of stores in one location and the sales are drastically lower than in another location. Can your system be smart enough to tell you so that you realize if there's less customers on the shop floor, perhaps you should have less workforce in that location? Can you automatically be rescheduling things like this to keep your bottom line as it is and making cross-functional changes to the way that your business is operating? Same in things like marketing campaigns, for example. Can you notice that the weather is bad in one area? And so perhaps you'll want some umbrellas to be marketed front and center rather than your sunscreen. It's these smart ways of working with data that are really allowing kind of innovations and success in the retail space. So let's spend a few minutes looking at kind of the customer journey and how it's kind of really key to the whole experience and the success of your retail business. So smart use of customer data, the ability to combine it with product and sales data, the execution of real-time personal engagements, we really see as the future of e-commerce. So we've got two kind of streams we're going to look at in parallel here, the in-person experience and the online experience. But of course, often there is a blend between these in reality when people are shopping. I might search for something online, look at it, actually I want to try it on in store, I buy something in store, perhaps I don't want to carry it home. This kind of thing. So the first thing that we're seeing kind of big innovations in is really search and display. So when you go into a store, how are you organizing your stock and your assortments to maximize the customer spend? If I go in trying to buy burgers for my barbecue, is there beer beside it that I might then impulsively buy? Do you have the data in place to see how the placement and the assortment of things you have in store will really drive revenue and drive sales? Same with search. So most customers these days will start their shopping in the search bar before they even look through the kind of the different pages that you have on your website. When I search, can you provide me with what I actually want to see based on either my demographic, etc., what my wish list, other things people have bought, etc. Then we're going into personalization. So, are you offering me personalized content? If I'm logged in, this is very easy. Go into the things that I've bought before, the colors I might like. You might know my size, you might know what geography I'm in, etc. Jen is in her mid-30s. Let's show her as female. Let's show her some makeup, for example. And what we're seeing is kind of a move towards that level of personalization into what we call hyper personalization. So rather than just understanding that base level of who I am, can you get into really in-depth hyper personalization? Not only do you know that my demographic, but you also know, Jen, like the last time I bought this certain lipstick, what color I bought, is that, how long ago, so that when I log into the website, you're showing me exactly what I want. Same when I come in store to the product shelf. We had an example earlier about shoes and Selfridges, but let's take that lipstick example a little bit further. What if I walked into a pharmacy and they were able to show me, hey, Jen, we know that you bought this lipstick a month ago. It's probably run out because we know how long you usually take in between purchases of that. By the way, it's on aisle 3. By the way, here's a 25% discount. Did you know there's a 2 for 3 offer on today? This kind of really in-person and in real time notifications and alerts to get the customer closer to what they want. Same thing goes then when it comes to data analysis in terms of kind of loyalty, payments and tracking. How can you actually use that payment data to drive your business in the right direction? Can I take sales receipt data, put it into customer buying patterns? Can I launch a model to understand, is my spend going up over time? Is it going down over time? How is that working? Me and Sylvia heard a really good example this week from Iceland, who's one of the kind of wholesale, not wholesale, but kind of one of the big kind of grocery retailers, mostly frozen goods in the UK. But what they noticed was when they moved a lot of their business online during the COVID pandemic, instead of spending 35 to 40 pounds in store, suddenly customers were spending 70 pounds online. So they said, how can we push our customers then, because of the analysis of that sales data, to purchase online rather than coming in, which is a venture that they never would have thought would be something that people would really use. So it's those kind of smart decisions that people are using. And the same comes to kind of, in-store purchasing, things like direct marketing, email, SMS. How can you reach your customer where they are and make sure you're maximizing their wallet spend? Post-purchase then is also a huge area. So how can you gamify products? How can you say you've bought this? Here's, now you're part of our loyalty program. If you buy this much, then you get this, etc., etc. So trying to incentivize people to not kind of forget about you the minute that they leave the shop, to make sure they're still engaged, that you can follow up their purchase with something else they might want to purchase. That kind of thing is becoming more and more common and is really helping retailers leverage their customers and get that personalized engagement at every single step of that journey. And that's what really drives a repeat purchase. That's what drives customer loyalty in a time when customer loyalty is probably at its lowest. So today's, when we look at this, how do we get there and what is the state of retail today? So today, like how we would see it is that retailers' competitive advantage is really tied to how well you can acquire and use the data available to you from various resources. So you have all these systems sitting all over the place with lots of data. You've got your product information management system, you've got your loyalty system, your customer system, customer service, etc., etc. How can you use that data to drive innovation, to drive business change, to drive insight? And, for example, how can you make POS transactional data available to your loyalty platform immediately so it can do certain work? How can you take in external data? So, for example, if there's a social media influencer promoting one of your items, how can you launch kind of adjust the sales marketing campaign to leverage that? So it's all about getting that data in real time and being able to use it as quickly as possible. And one of the things we see, and this isn't just true in retail, but across the board, is that you can't buy competitive advantage. Of course, there's millions of great software products that are built, e-commerce applications, CMS, et cetera, and we're not knocking them at all. But if you're doing exactly the same as your competitor in the retail space, if you're not building your own differentiation on top of that, you're not going to have a digital advantage when it comes to competition. And the other thing is, what you really need to do then is to be able to empower your developers to build that differentiation on top, not just once, but in iterative manner. So retail is one of the places where we see innovations coming closer and closer and closer, especially in something like retail groceries, where the margins are extremely low. If your competitor is offering something else, you need to be able to offer that service very, very quickly. So how can you enable your development community? How can you bring these products, these services, etc., to market as fast as possible? And the answer is that the key is data. So working with data is traditionally the hardest part of kind of digitizing your business. And 70% of enterprises fail in their digital transformation initiatives because of the difficulty there is working with their data across their enterprise. So let's talk about a few kind of e-commerce challenges. And there's a lot of content here, but I'll quickly go through some of these, and I'm sure they'll be familiar to you. So number one is those data silos. So you need to have a single view of data across your customers, product suppliers, to be able to give your customers, your loyalty apps, your customer service, a real-time view, customer 360 across that. How can you do that when your data is divided into lots of different systems? Perhaps it's a customer system, a loyalty system, a sales transaction system. Even from a customer service perspective, it's impossible to actually give that customer good service in real time without having to look through all of those data silos. Same when it comes to product. If you want to have a real-time product catalog, you need to make sure that you can update your product catalog in real time, that the product catalog that I'm seeing on my mobile device is the same that I'm seeing on the web page, is the same that the staff member is seeing on their iPad. Traditionally, with PIMS technology, where people are piping different products into different product catalog front-end storage, those systems don't always marry up. And when it comes to an omnichannel experience, it's almost impossible to deliver. Without that view of kind of single view of data when it comes to products, suppliers, customers, etc., enabling things like engaging customers in real time, hyper-personalization becomes extremely, extremely difficult. And being able to provide that uniform customer service is extremely difficult. Being able to have a good mobile strategy where what you're seeing on the app is exactly the same as online, exactly the same as in store, becomes extremely difficult. Data syncing when your data is stored in legacy technology is extremely difficult when it comes to sorting it out. And at the end then, let's talk about kind of scalability. So retailers, when you're trying to make your operations and your IT operations as efficient as possible, you need a kind of a data storage and an architecture that's as simple as possible. You need to be able to be scalable, elastically scale to increase or decrease to your customer demands. You want it to be as hands-off as possible. So, this move to fully managed services, and you need it to be secure. You're handling payment data, sales data, customer data, PII. You need to ensure that wherever you're storing your data, it's going to be secure. So data really is at the heart then of a lot of these retail challenges. When you think of, we are talking about retailers that might have started 50 years ago, but even in the last few years, if you're thinking of, retailers that are moving from on-premise to online, or even from one cloud to another because their competitor might have launched in that space. And there's a lot of proprietary systems. The classic thing to do would be to buy a product information management system, buy a big e-commerce monolith, buy a content management system, and then try to network all of these things together. Now, within these different systems, you get a lot of different data types. Whatever the proprietary systems are working in. So for example, point of sales, you might get some XML data. But perhaps you might have some IoT sensor data from elsewhere in the business. And then you want to have an API layer that you're able to integrate in different things. So it becomes very difficult. And if you're looking at a relational model and how to relationally model that, it becomes thousands and thousands and thousands of tables. And this little diagram on the right-hand side is really indicative of the kind of things that we're seeing at retail customers who haven't modernized. The intricate web and map of how that data is mapped together is almost impossible to decipher and can lead to real slowdowns when it comes to adding new data into the system. So even if there's a slightly different product type, we have customers like Otto, which is a large German retailer, who before they modernized, it was taking them 12 hours to update their product catalog. That's gone down to minutes. So I've kind of covered this, but in terms of kind of that e-commerce challenge, really what we were looking at was a lot of monolithic applications. It's really common sense and common knowledge these days that this is not a good way to innovate. Breaking things up into microservices, not having a fully tracked front end to back end, going towards a more headless model. This is what we're seeing in e-commerce when it comes to architecturally changing the stack. So how have retailers kind of tried to fix that problem of having that big monolithic application? Well, what they'll do is start to apply band-aids around the relational database to kind of build more modern experiences. Let's put in a NoSQL cache to speed up our transactions. Let's put in a search engine to put in to serve up relevant information in our search bar. Then we've got some mobile devices that have a separate data store for that. And then let's build a big data warehouse and we can ETL all of our data into there to run reports, etc. Now, that will solve all of your business problems, but there's one major problem there. You're ETLing, moving the data around, which of course is creating lag. Now, that could be 5 minutes, that could be 15 minutes, that could be a day or even a week, but it's not real time. When a customer is on your e-commerce page or where they're checking out at the till and you're trying to get up their loyalty information, even a few seconds or a few milliseconds can make a difference between a sale or kind of an upsell and not having anything at all. And the second problem is management. So this is sometimes what we'll see when it comes to a data landscape. You'll start with a sales data system, inventory, supplier order management, pipe everything into an enterprise data warehouse. Perhaps then you've got a data lake, then you need a search engine, then you need a mobile database, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And the giant web that you're creating, what we sometimes call a spaghetti architecture, it's serving some of your needs, but it's absolutely massive to manage operationally, and also makes it almost impossible to deliver experiences in real time. If you're trying to deliver an omnichannel experience and you need to touch how many different data layers, it's very difficult. If you're trying to add a new product and you've got to add it in 15 different places, the propagation of that, the data synchronization, is very difficult to manage and maintain. And complexity kills productivity. I love this quote. So anytime there's really complex problem, we have to sit there and understand this vast mapping of tables. Okay, if I update this here, does it go here, 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 here? It sucks the life out of developers who really just want to get on with innovating. Makes products difficult to plan, build, test, and it slows down that really important go-to-market when it comes to delivering new features, new functionality to your customers. Where does MongoDB come in? So MongoDB is leading modern mission critical database. And perhaps some of you who've interacted with MongoDB, we're only 11, 12 years old now as a company. And we've come a long way in the last 5 years, in particular, with the launch of Atlas, our fully managed database as a service, which includes other parts into our data platform. And also in terms of the number of clients we now have 33,000 clients all across the world. You'll see some of our big retail clients down here below, the likes of Otto, IKEA, Nike, Under Armour, Ticketex, AO, Adeo, the list goes on and on and on. And you'll all be different retailers working in different segments. Reach out to us if you have a specific question about a different, whether it's fashion or grocery, high value goods. We're interested in hearing kind of what you're looking at in each of those sections. We probably have a relevant use case to go through with you. One of the things I want to highlight here is this is actually an old stat when it says 3,200 plus employees. We're actually more at kind of 4,500 employees now. We're growing incredibly quickly. And the thing to note here is that 50% of our workforce are in research and development. Research and development for one product, one database. Yes, we've got some additional services, but when you compare that to the likes of, an AWS or a Google, this is all just on the core database, MongoDB, and the additional services we're offering around it. So the pace of innovation that we're able to keep up is absolutely incredible. So MongoDB, why is it so good for retail? And what is the core of the database? So MongoDB has a document model database. And so related data contained in a single rich document. So you can see very intuitively what this data is. And if you imagine this in a customer perspective at your store, we've got John Doe, we know where he works, we've got his address, we've got his date of birth, etc. Compared to a relational model, where you've got to take that data from a lot of different tables, it's really, first of all, intuitive, easy to use from a developer perspective. I think it's really relevant here when you think of, the data sets that you have in retail. You have a store, you have a product, you have a person. All of those map really well to objects and object-oriented programming, can map directly well to a document in a document model here. It's really easy to understand, really easy to develop against. And also the documents can be different. Let's say I've been shopping on the site, every day this week, I've bought a whole load of things. Suddenly you'll have user information and preferences for me. Perhaps Silvio hasn't been shopping all week, you've got none of that information for him. You don't have to, you can add additional fields, and different types of customers can coexist without breaking the system. Let's say you want to add some additional attributes about me. Perhaps you suddenly know, my height, my dress size, etc. You can add those in. Perhaps you suddenly realize I'm gluten-free or vegetarian. You can add that in without having to incur downtime across your whole system, without having to update a complex schema. This really allows innovation. If you think of different DevOps squads working on the same code, the same database, this allows people to kind of add things in, to iteratively develop, and that really enables innovation. So intuitive to work with, but also fast. Like MongoDB is a fast database, just because of its very good caching technology, very powerful query language. But one of the things that is often forgotten about is if you're going to a lot of different tables to collect all of this data about me, my sales receipt data, my loyalty program points, my customer service complaints, you're going to a lot of different tables. Each one of those is in fact a lot of different tables. That's a lot of different places on disk. If you have one customer document that has all of my data, you're going to one place on disk. So intuitively, it's a very fast way of working with data. Now, can you join data between documents, between collections? Yes, you can. But of course, because it's denormalized, your need to join across collections is much, much lessened. So we've gone over the document model, and so important, flexibly adapt to change. So especially if you're looking at a product data set where, we have retailers like, the likes of Tesco, who started off in grocery, now there's mobile, now they're doing, banking, they're selling everything from, fashion to lemons to mobile phones. The amount of variety there is within that product data is absolutely phenomenal. We see this even more in customers like Bosch, the washing machine company, who are creating lots of different parts. The amount of permutations between different types of parts and dimensions for parts for a washing machine is something that in a relational data model is very different to model. You can see here that we can have arrays, we can have different types of data, and also the data is hard typed. This is really good to note because a lot of non-SQL databases don't have this feature. So if you want to have, for example, a date, I've got a date of birth here, but that could be an expiry date on a grocery product. If I wanted to have a number, and I can do those sort of things, and that makes the data really easy to work with then when you want to do things like, best before is when you want to do a lot of calculations on the amount of sales you've made, etc. Now, do your developers have to learn an entirely new language? No. So yes, the MongoDB query language may be different to the SQL worlds you may be coming from in terms of if you've traditionally worked with the likes of DB2 or Oracle. But really good thing to note is that we have intuitive and idiomatic drivers. So that means that you're coding in Java, your object in Java goes through a Java driver and becomes the documenting code. Really intuitive, really easy to work with. And it also means you can work in kind of a multi-language approach, that if my development team or my development squad wants to work in Java and Silvio's wants to work in Node.js, it's absolutely no problem. The translation is done by the drivers and the documents are the same. So moving on from kind of just the database itself. So MongoDB is available as a database you can install on your laptop, in your data center, etc., in your own cloud environment. But where we're seeing a lot of growth now and movement is retailers don't want to manage the database. They want to have it fully managed. And so a few years ago, we released MongoDB Atlas, which is a fully managed database as a service. Great to have that fully managed database as a service. But what are the other things that we can add to that? Then, especially in a retail, I won't go through everything, but in a retail context that really add value when you're trying to develop applications. So number one is kind of the ability to support full text search. We've built Lucene 8 into the platform with all of the data sync and ability to support having data on mobile devices at the edge without having to manually sync data. The ability to deliver real-time analytics on live data without having to move data back and forth between different things and create data lag, and one easy query interface for all of those different workloads. And one great thing to note, actually, and especially when it comes to retailers, and we're seeing a lot of shifts, as particularly away from AWS, and we don't know what's going to happen in the future in terms of kind of multi-cloud, etc. But MongoDB is completely platform agnostic. So that means not only can it run the same on-premise as it does in AWS and does in Google, but actually in Atlas, we've given the availability to run a multi-cloud cluster. So good example of this is 7-Eleven. They run their operational workload in AWS, but they want to make the best of breed technologies across every cloud. So actually, they spin up an additional analytics node in GCP, which is part of their database cluster. It's kept up to date automatically, and they can run machine learning algorithms against that. So really clever use of the different clouds and the multi-cloud capability. So Atlas Search, yeah, we've embedded full text search into our application. I think e-commerce, and especially in like product search, there's nowhere where this is kind of, more important. Most people start their buying journey on the search bar. If you can't provide search, I would have a strong opinion that no e-commerce website should be without a search. And if you're even thinking of your customer data set, if you've got a customer services representative, if they can't search and quickly find a user, it becomes a big problem and kind of really delays that whole interaction. So we've built Lucene 8 into the MongoDB Atlas platform. All of the data sync is done for you. Basically, all you need to do is turn on search, create an index. All of those indexes will be kept in sync for you. You don't need to manage the data synchronization, etc. What does it provide? Well, a lot of the really good features that you kind of come to know and love from most search platforms. So, for example, fuzzy matching, autocomplete, highlighting, filters and facets. So especially in e-commerce, this is something we see as very important. People are using Amazon every single day. They would expect a similar experience on your website. How can you deliver that very quickly without causing delays in your go-to-market? Geographic search. So if I want to see where are the closest shops in my area, is the item that I'm looking for available in the shop local to me? This is the kind of things that customers are really looking for these days. And then custom scoring. So this is really where you can start to, first of all, give personalization, but also, say, for example, you're Amazon and you've got a range of products that you're building in-house. Perhaps I want to give them to the customer first. Perhaps I want to give the ones that have the highest rating to the customer first. This is really powerful when it comes to really giving your customers something that they might want to buy. And the last piece I want to touch on then is their mobile sync offering. So built into MongoDB Atlas, we have our app services. So within that app services, you can create functions and triggers to build event-driven architectures. There's a lot of things you can do. And one of the most powerful things when it comes to the context of retail is their device sync. So MongoDB acquired a mobile database company called Realm a couple of years ago. What we've been building over the last few years is an automatic sync capability, so that if your data is in Atlas, in our fully managed database, and you're building a mobile app, you no longer have to build that sync capability. We've built it for you, including kind of, real-time data sync, conflict resolution, offline mode, so that especially where we see this a lot is in kind of big retail chains that might have warehouses or shops that don't always have signal. Does your stockroom always have signal? Very unlikely. So how can you let workers use a system that won't lose the data without you having to build that kind of actually really complex architecture? So I've talked a lot, and I want to make sure that we have enough time for questions. So I think this is a really good time to hand over to Silvio for the demo. Oh, just one thing to note actually before I do that. So we've got some great examples, customer stories on our website. So whether you're interested in kind of the likes of AO that we've mentioned before, Leo Merlin or Adeo, Otto is a great use case in Germany. We've got great public documentation and use cases. If you want to see, in real life, how are customers using MongoDB to modernize their applications? Commerce Tools is a great example. Commerce Tools is a kind of a ISV software vendor who've built MongoDB across their entire service thing. So this is a headless e-commerce modern solution entirely built on MongoDB. That can be built into your stack. So a huge amount of customers. I think Audi is a really good customer story they've got live on their site if you want to read about that. Okay, Silvio, take it away.
Sure. Thank you very much, Genevieve. So we are now going to play a very short demo highlighting some of the key capabilities of MongoDB Atlas when it comes to spinning up and managing database clusters. So we can go to the next one. Can you skip to the next slide, please? Thank you. Yeah, I cannot hear the audio. We might just have to reshare it. Can you please reshare the screen, as I cannot hear the...
Jen, I think you shouldn't be on mute, maybe, if you want to share the audio, just tonight.
Triggers, and it comes with a strong set of APIs, more specifically the...
Apologies. Can you hear me now?
Yeah.
We can, yeah.
Okay, wonderful.
Yeah, before I delve into the creation of a new cluster, I believe it's worth showing you where all of this sits within MongoDB. So here we are in the MongoDB cloud interface. So as you can see, you have various...
Hey, Jen. Yeah, sorry, you stopped sharing your screen. If you can just share it again and play the video.
With the audio sharing enabled.
Oh, apologies. Sorry.
These things are always,
Here we go.
To get going. So apologies for this. So before I delve into the creation of a new cluster, I believe it's worth showing you where all of this sits within MongoDB. So here we are in the MongoDB cloud interface. So as you can see, you have various options, various services and products that you can leverage, such as Atlas, which is our database as a service solution, App Services, which is a serverless environment, which you can use to build application, integrate services, and connect to your data without any sort of operational overheads. It provides the ability to create function and triggers, and it comes with a strong set of APIs, more specifically the data API and GraphQL to integrate your Atlas data into your application. It also comes with a device sync, which is a tool to seamlessly sync the data between Atlas and the data that sits in your mobile application. Last but not least, we have Charts, which is a BI and data visualization tool fully embedded into the database. Delving into the Atlas database, we can say that an account is usually made up of one or more organizations. So an organization can be your whole business or a particular business line. Each organization is then made up of one or more projects. So a project can define an application, a team, or an environment, depending on what works for your architecture and your developers. Each project has its own VPC for the management of security, access, and billing. This is also where your data release clusters sit. So as you can see here in my environment, I have a number of them. And it's also where you can create a new one. So if we click the create button here on the top right-hand side, we can do exactly that. So we can see here in the cluster creation screen that we have three options for your cluster. So we have a serverless cluster option, which simplifies your deployment, as you don't have to choose the underlying size of your database and your cluster as it is fully managed for you depending on your workload requirements. You also have the shared cluster, which sits on a shared cloud infrastructure. So we recommend this for POCs or small MVPs, and also when learning about MongoDB. So this is a completely free of charge cluster option. And I highly encourage you to, at the end of this demo, go into MongoDB Cloud, create an account, and spin up a shared cluster to start exploring what MongoDB can offer. In the middle here, we also have a dedicated cluster option, which is the option that provides you with most flexibility regarding the configuration and the infrastructure settings, as we're going to see in a moment. So this is the option that we recommend for managing mission-critical applications that require high availability and a global distribution. By scrolling further down below, you can see that we can select either AWS, GCP, and Azure. In fact, MongoDB Atlas comes with native support for the three major cloud providers, and you can also mix and match different cloud providers to meet any of your organizational, technical, or regulatory requirement. Each cloud provider comes with a number of cloud regions that you can select across the globe. And the important thing to note about this is that the nodes that you decide to configure for your clusters are distributed across all the availability zones for the particular region that you select, giving you 99.995% of uptime. So it is very resilient and very, very strong. If you want to enable a multi-cloud and multi-region configuration with workload isolation to increase the resiliency even further, you can toggle this icon over here, this option. And what we can see here is that you can further define the configuration for your electable nodes. So in this instance, we rely on the US East 2 AWS region, which has 3 nodes. So they will be essentially the primary and 2 secondary ones. But if we want to strengthen even further, nothing stops us from adding another region. So let's say that we want to select the US East 1, still on AWS. We could also pick a different cloud providers if we want to, with 2 nodes. So what this means is that if your nodes in the US 2 region become unavailable for any major event that might happen, then the US East 1 nodes located, so the nodes located in the US East 1 region will come into play to provide you with high availability and data access. You can do the same sort of granular configuration also for read-only nodes to optimize local reads. and also for analytics nodes if you have any analytical queries that you need to run or workloads. So let's say that you have a particularly heavy analytics workload running on GCP, and you don't want it to impact your other operational workloads, and you can very easily set up an additional node configuration running on GCP over here to avoid any impacts on other parts of your database. Scrolling further down, we can see the concept of cluster tier. So a tier is a sort of t-shirt size for your cluster. So it comes with a preset amount of RAM, storage, and the vCPU capacity, and also a relative price. You can further customize your cluster tier configuration by enabling a number of advanced features, such as enabling auto-scaling from a cluster tier perspective. So what this means is that if for any reason the workload in your database increases or decreases, then the cluster can be scaled up to the next tier or the lower one, depending on the circumstances. So this will essentially scale up your RAM and CPU capacity for your cluster. You can also enable storage scaling. So this is particularly useful to cater for the natural increases of data volume that results from running the database for a certain period of time. And the way it works in practice is that the storage will be scaled up whenever you hit 90% of the current storage capacity that you have specified. So you can enable that parameter as well. You can also switch between tiers very easily with no downtime, as the operations are performed in a rolling manner. Scrolling further down, we can see some additional settings that you can specify, such as selecting the MongoDB version. So let's pick the latest one over here. And this is quite crucial, as MongoDB performs patches, releases, and minor versions upgrades fully automatically in the backend. So you don't really have to worry about performing any of those. And also, when it comes to major releases, we can say that it can be done, the upgrade can be done seamlessly without dealing with package files or having to modify the underlying operating systems. It also comes with automatic backup capabilities that we strongly encourage you to enable. So you can do that in the section over here. And many other advanced features, such as deciding how to manage your encryption keys. Last but not least, we can specify a cluster name. So let's give it the name of my cluster. And this is really the end of this section. So you can see here at the end the estimated price for your cluster, and you can proceed to the creation of the cluster itself. So this is a great configuration if you want to optimize for local reads. If you want to have an architecture that enables for truly global local reads and writes, then you can go into the section here higher above and enable global rights functionality. So we can select a particular configuration that has been preset for us. You can customize it as you please. So let's pick the one here on the left-hand side. And we can see that each multiple zones are created. So we can have, we have them in different colors, and each zone is supported by a different cloud region. So let's say that the Americas one in this section is supported by the US East one running on AWS, and the EMEA zone is supported by the US Central one, still on AWS. So what this means is that you can really customize your deployment with primaries located in high volume areas. So you can minimize the latency of your data access virtually anywhere in the world. So let's say that we are happy with this particular deployment, and let's click on create cluster. So you will see that an additional container will be created in the screen where we were before, which will be, let's see, further down below here. So the cluster will be created in about 10 minutes. And you can see that this is a dedicated cluster. You can see the version of MongoDB that it is leveraging, the cloud provider, and so forth. If we go to a cluster that is already up and running, we can see that you can view the monitoring, browse the collections of your data. So actually the data that is stored in your cluster and connect to your database itself. If we click on view monitoring, we can also see a number of visualizations that really show the traffic that goes through each nodes of your cluster. And you can really enable a number of parameters that can allow you to customize this view even further.
Perfect. I'm glad we got that video going in the end. So I hope that gave you a really good idea of MongoDB, how easy it is to spin up a cluster. And let's jump into the Q&A. Oh.
Sure, let's do that. Thank you. Thank you, Genevieve. And thank you for asking a few questions. Appreciate it.
Just one note before we jump into questions, and we've only got a couple of minutes. But Soha's just about to launch a survey. It's just 4 short questions for you guys that you can fill out in the background, just to give us a good idea of how did you find the webinar? Are you using MongoDB? What other subjects are you interested in? Okay, Sylvia, do you have some questions for me?
Yeah, we have a few. So the first one, is the cluster a pay-as-you-go, or are the rates fixed?
Yeah, so in MongoDB Atlas, it is a pay-as-you-go service. So you're only paying for what you use. The base charges for any cluster are kind of picked on the infrastructure sizes. So you saw, as Sylvia went through the cluster selection there, there's a certain price per tier, and that's the majority of what you will pay. So it's quite easy to predict into the future what you're going to pay on your cluster. Now, if you're using the auto scale capabilities, of course, your cluster will scale up and down depending on the workload that you have and the data volume, if it's increasing or not. So let's say you've picked an M30 and there's a certain price for that, and then you don't have that many customers on your site, you don't need that much CPU or RAM, that'll scale down, so you're paying less. And so you're only really paying for what you use there.
Perfect. Thank you very much. And another one. So I'm new at this. So what would you recommend as a next step in getting a lot more in-depth look at Atlas? Great.
I'm glad we piqued your interest. So what I would really recommend is looking at our, there's a few places you could go actually. The MongoDB University is an absolutely great resource. There we've got loads of courses about intro to MongoDB, different subjects, whether you're more technical or less technical. We've got a developer path, we've got a DBA path, there's certifications, and there's a lot of interesting topics there. If you want to take kind of like a less kind of training route, actually our MongoDB YouTube channel has some excellent content. We just had our MongoDB World Conference, when was it? The start of June, where we announced kind of a MongoDB 6 go live, a lot of the new features, and a lot of kind of the thought leadership from our different teams. So that's also a great place to start looking. If you're interested in retail specifically, and we do have a retail landing page. Sylvia, I'm not sure if you put the link in already, but we can put it in soon. So, you know, if you just want like a landing page from which you can find our use cases in retail, you know, different pieces about, you know, how MongoDB can be used for personalization, et cetera, please go there. Or if you want to talk to us, if you've got an application that you're looking to re-platform, if you're curious, you know, reach out to myself, Sylvia, or Soha, and we're more than happy to answer your question or direct you to the right team.
Perfect. Thank you very much. And then another one, what's the drawback of using MongoDB in e-commerce over the traditional RDBMS database? Okay,
this is the classic question. Whenever we do a webinar. So I will say, you know, I'm a strong believer that there's so many advantages to using MongoDB for an e-commerce application. Kind of really the intuitive document model is one of them. Because of what we were talking about earlier, you know, it's a product in the store, it's an object in your code, it's a document in MongoDB. But of course, there's a little bit of learning along the way. So if you come from an Oracle background and you're used to relational modeling, there is a little learning curve when it comes to how should I model my data when I move into MongoDB. Because there's optionality in terms of, are you going to embed some of that product data, let's say, you know, other products you might want to buy with this one, into that same document, or are you going to store that into a different collection? There's a design piece of work and that you're going to have to learn. You know, if you've got an application where, you know, it's just doing business as usual, you're not kind of changing it that much, then I'd say, you know, there's probably no big benefit in relearning everything, replatforming anything. But if you're looking at something like e-commerce where you're going to have to be changing, et cetera, I think it is worth spending the time learning a new query language, understanding how to document model. That's not something you have to do on your own. You can use some of those great enablement resources that we just described, or a professional services team to help you kind of move along that journey. So I'd say kind of the downside is having to learn a new technology, having to incorporate a new technology into your stack to get going.
Thank you very much, Genevieve. I know that we are almost running out of time. I see that there are a couple more in the chat, but we'll aim to answer those offline.
Okay, brilliant. Then just to kind of close the call, just a very quick mention. So we did just have our MongoDB World Conference in New York. You can look at that content on YouTube if you're interested. But we've got 2 local events coming up in the Europe time zone. So .local Frankfurt, which is in 3 or 4 weeks. Use the QR code there if you want to have a look. And we're also running a .local London mid-November. So if you're interested in coming along, meeting us, learning more, meeting other customers, users of MongoDB, that's a great place to go. And just thank you for your time. So thank you. It's been it's been great to have so many of you on the call, and I hope you learned something about MongoDB, and have a wonderful day.
Thank you very much.
Thanks, everyone.